Hi, my name is Sarah,
My name is Mark,
and we like to talk about video games.
and today we're talking about Fallout 4 and narrative urgency.
Welcome back to the apocalypse. Although it's Boston, so people don't necessarily know. Sorry, Boston.
Fallout 4. What are your thoughts on this game? I am curious, actually.
Okay, it has some... It did get... I wouldn't say it was stuck in development hell, but it was in development for a very long time, and, it's a great game, but that does show. Like, it doesn't look as advanced as some of that. They really need to start working on a new engine, to be honest.
Coming right out and saying it.
Yeah, they need a new engine. It's visually not quite as advanced as other things. In terms of game, I can see why everybody's saying they enjoyed it, though. I mean, it's pretty interesting.
It definitely handles a lot better than the previous games. Certainly, I would certainly agree, or at least my opinion on the matter is that it plays the best of like the 4, or at least of the 3D ones right now. You could always argue that Fallout 1 and 2 are so different in terms of how they play that they're not really comparable.
Yeah, you can't compare those two different methods.
But of the 3D ones, I would say that this one handles the best as far as gunplay is concerned, and like weapons and tools you can use.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it looks bad. It does look decent considering how long it was in development.
And it's definitely a lot more colorful than the previous games.
Yes, that's nice.
My personal issue with the game, and I mean, for some people this might not even be an issue. For most people, it's probably not an issue. But it's mainly in how Bethesda handles their narrative. In this game and in Fallout 3, Skyrim as well, there is a lot of urgency in the plot. So like in Fallout 3, you had to find your father, like only your father could solve the issues of Washington. And in this game, your child has been kidnapped. And if you are not a shitty parent, you will go after
go and
them.
Find them.
And
that guy you just picked body parts from was made mostly of metal, by the way.
Oh, he was in a what do you call it? Jeez, I don't remember.
AI.
No, he was in the power armor. That's what the term I'm looking for.
Yes.
Power armor in this game is like a big part of it. You can get like frames and kind of build your own armor around the frame. That bandit was basically just wearing a frame, which is why he looked all robotic. So what was I saying?
Narrative urgency.
Yeah. So, Deathclaw!
Hello, Deathclaw.
So let me say what the positive is for this. The giving a plot like that, where you have a lot of urgency going after, your son or your father, or trying to deal with something very specific, can lead you to very interesting locations, because the main story will move at a pace that leads you to specific areas that they can plan around. The developers know that, hey, after mission 2, they're going to go to the cool forest area, and we could add in a bunch of different things related to that forest area. But the problem is, with an open world like Fallout, is that the players inevitably will ignore this main story, mostly because they don't care. There
are interesting things. Even if they do care, there are so many interesting things that it would honestly be a shame if you missed them.
Yeah, and it's definitely very easy to get distracted. You walk into an area, you see a new door you can go into to a new area, and hey, there might be cool loot
shiny.
in there.
Ooh, shiny.
Yeah.
Ooh, shiny.
Or I can build up my power armor some more and let me go to further and further areas. But
Church.
What ends up happening is it ends up creating a weird pacing issue, because it's like there's so much importance placed on the main story. Like, especially in Fallout 4 where they made your character voiced, a lot of your conversations involve finding Sean. Where is Sean? I think his name was Sean. God, I don't even remember. That's how little it stuck with me.
You're a great parent, Mark.
And it becomes distracting because it's like there's so much urgency placed on finding this character, but I could go, pick my nose for 4 hours or build a settlement, or do another mission for another NPC or something. And no matter how long I take, no matter how no matter how many in-game days pass, my son will always be where he is. And I'm not going to say spoilers in case people haven't gotten there. But it is just kind of annoying to me that, like, they frame these stories to be so super important, like being the Dragonborn in Skyrim. That planet will never burn to the ground, no matter how long you take picking flowers as opposed to going to High Hrothgard.
Yeah. I think the main difference between games such as Fallout 4 and, say, the example I used talking to you before was Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. There's a moment later on in the game where you've basically... It's implied that you've got to get a character to another character to basically save their life. They're riding around on your back the entire time. And there's this sense of urgency, and most people will go straight there because, they don't want Midna to die. But that's a more... Legend of Zelda isn't linear you do end up going to a lot of different places in Zelda. It's not 100% a linear experience, but the story itself is pretty linear and straightforward, so most people will just do that. There won't be as many crazy distractions buzzing around as there is in something like Fallout.
And something in regards to Zelda in comparison to, say, like a Fallout game is that in Zelda you typically aren't straight up told where the next area is. You're kind of left to your own devices to explore the environment and find those areas. So while the gameplay is linear, you are encouraged to experiment and explore and talk to NPCs and do side quests, because usually they will lead to or have some sort of impact on where the next dungeon is, or give you something helpful like more HP or more health.
The main difference that I can think of, just using the example I brought up, is that in this game you are given this child and this spouse, which has to be heterosexual, whether you want it or not, and they're just pushed on you a bit, whereas in, say, Zelda, you've had most of the game to attach to the characters, so it feels more urgent in that sense, whereas in this, you don't actually know this kid, ostensibly you should be helping them, they're your child, but... It's just, you haven't had that bonding that you would with another character in a different game, which is where the problem comes in, I think. Nobody cares, because why would they?
It's like, in Fallout 4, they kind of ask you to step into the role of this parent, as opposed to creating a role for yourself that you're going to be in this game. Like, you can definitely play the game as someone who steals from everybody and is an asshole, or someone who... isn't, as you said, like, isn't heterosexual. Like, there are romance options that are, but it doesn't change the fact that the main story is you had a wife or husband that you love, the kid gets stolen, and your character loves that kid and wants to go after them. Regardless of how the rest of the game plays out. They could be a murdering psychopath with no regard for human life. But they still love that kid. And they will tell every NPC you find.
That is another thing that is not... I think it's a criticism that many people had about Fallout 4, was you do remove a bit of the independence in the pushing you into that specific situation, whereas the courier, you could have been anybody beforehand. That even in Fallout 3, you could have constructed your own identity, but in this one... You're a specific person, and adding a voice didn't help with that, I think.
I think you're right. I think there might have been... it wouldn't have felt as forced if they weren't voiced. Like, because they are voiced, it gives them... it almost gives them a specific personality, a specific tone in how they're saying what they're saying. Whereas
It gives you a lot less choices in narrative as well. There were just fewer examples because they had to record them all.
Right. Whereas in 3, and especially in New Vegas, the lack of voice ends up being a benefit because you can kind of pick and choose how they're presenting this information, how they're saying this. Like, you can, in your own head, your own creativity, kind of decide how your character is acting. 3 to a lesser...
I've seen Let's Players do that. It's amazing.
Yeah. And then, like, you know, as much as I like New Vegas over 3, like, 3 handles it fairly well. They at least set up the story where you're forced out of the vault, and it's up to you to make your own...
My money's on the Deathclaw.
Yeah, the synths are fighting the Deathclaw. I guess this character I had... Because this character I was definitely on the synth side, so... And I had beaten the game, so I must have done something to piss off every faction.
Probably accidentally shoot them.
But, you know, like 3, you basically step out of the vault, and it's up to you to make an identity for that character. You know, there's definitely urgency to find your father, but it's not as forced as it is in this game. Like, you know, you can go up to a character, and your 5 or 6 dialogue options won't be, hey, where's my pop? It'll usually be like, hey, what's this town? You guys need help? Can I shoot you?
Yeah, and when you think about it, you probably wouldn't go straight into a completely alien situation in an apocalyptic environment and just immediately start asking where your father is. You'd probably be a bit more cautious.
Yeah. And like, it doesn't need to be this way. I just always wonder why Bethesda chooses to have their main stories be so, like, disconnected from the actual interesting storytelling elements, which is, you know, exploring and stumbling upon these crazy situations. You know, the moment-to-moment storytelling in Fallout 4 is great. It's when it gets to the actual main narrative that it's like, it's just weird and it feels out of place, and despite how heavy the urgency appears to be with every character telling you, hey, you need to do this, you need to do that, hey, where's my son, where's Sean?
You can take as long as you like.
You can take as long as you like. You can shoot Deathclaw. Why did I bump into so many Deathclaws? This is our third one. We're in Deathclaw
Maybe they've
country.
arranged a faction and decided you're their primary target or something.
This is actually pretty fun. I actually happened to stumble upon power armor in the middle of this.
Seriously? What,
Yeah,
just stumble on it lying out there?
Yeah. It should be in a few seconds. Because he starts running away. If you look on the left, you see it there on the left, and I was just like, oh shit, power armor.
Wow.
I was like,
just
give me...
standing there.
Thanks for waiting for me to get in this. Oh, you. he clipped me there right at the end.
Why is Dinner now in a heavy metal suit?
So I like that there. That was a great story moment. You know, you're running from this Deathclaw. All hope is possibly lost. And then
power armor
left behind from some world, you know, like pre-war tech just happened to be left behind.
Just standing there in the sun with a ring of light around it.
Yeah, left behind by some soldier who
Someone
ran
who
out
wasn't
of
as
energy.
lucky as you were.
Yeah, very, very cool.
Bethesda does do a lot of things well. I mean, I'm not saying at all that their storytelling is bad, because as you mentioned, that the storytelling in Vegas and 3 is just so seamless and integrated. It's literally just the main point that we have problems with.
Well, with New Vegas, outside of some DLC story, New Vegas, its story is handled much differently, and that's also because it was made by Obsidian, not Bethesda. Obsidian basically made this spin-off game while Bethesda was working on other projects, probably Skyrim at the time.
Worth it.
Skyrim. I love New Vegas, especially its main story, and that's because I feel like its main story focused way more on just what the setting was doing. You know, you have all these factions vying for power, and you're just dropped in the middle of it. And the reason that works so well is because while there was like a main narrative draw, basically it was like find this computer chip and see what it had to do with why did everybody want it. You didn't necessarily need to care about that. You didn't even need to look for it.
There was even narrative explanation for that. Like, you'd literally just woken up having been dead. You could literally craft a new life for yourself if you didn't like the one you had. So you might as well do it if you don't want to chip.
Very similar to 3, in that you know, you're kind of presented with this moment where you can do, you know, you can change how you were in the vault because you're no longer living there. I ended up trying to hack that computer forever, so I just skipped past it. The reason it works so well in New Vegas, I feel, is because even if you're not paying attention to the main story, you're still impacting the main story because you're doing side quests for the NCR, you're doing side quests for the Legion, you might be fighting the Legion, you might be killing members of them, you might be helping a town that is affiliated with Mr. House.
Yeah, and you can see the ripple effect just spreading out through the entire game.
Right. And if maybe the effect is more minor than I'm making it sound, but it doesn't change the fact that the main story is to go and explore and go and do these things and get involved in the world of New Vegas. Whereas Fallout 4 story, up until the end, is basically forget the world, I just need to go find my kid. Once you find your kid, then, you know, factions start really coming into play at that point. But even then, it's not handled great. Mostly because everyone has plot armor, which is very annoying. They will only die when the quest demands that they die.
They did seem a lot more limited in where the story could go. Probably again as a result of the character being so set in stone.
Yeah. I do think that, like, I have no doubt that the Harbor DLC that's coming out, it's probably going to have a linear story, but it's probably going to be a good story.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying...
Some of the DLC for Fallout 4 was for New Vegas was just, like, the best thing
Well, that's what I'm
ever.
saying. That's what I'm saying, is that that's kind of what the DLC should be used for, I feel like, in Fallout, because you have the open world in 3, New Vegas, and 4, to have these moment-to-moment stories, these great moments where you come across a city and there's a bunch of weird stuff going on, and you find power armor while you're getting attacked by, you know, death claws and whatnot. And then once you've established this world and your characters established their place in it, that's when you can have this DLC that's very story-focused and very linear, but allows you to really play your role specifically in that. New Vegas did that phenomenally, I feel like, with the Sierra Madre, where they kind of...
that is the best DLC in the entire
series. They kind of force you into this... They force you into this Ocean 11 style heist where you're forced into it because you got this like bomb collar on, but it still doesn't change the fact that you might want to betray these people, or you might want to, you know, free yourself over them, and you know, there's a whole power play going on, really well done. But it's a lot more... It's
such an effective ghost story as well, even considering there is no actual ghost. It's a ghost story.
And it's great because you still have the free-roaming narrative of the main story. And that's kind of just an area you stumble upon if you have the DLC. And that's why I am looking forward to the DLC of this game. I think it's gonna have a good story. I'm hoping it's gonna have a good story anyway. Bethesda usually does a fairly good job at having their expansions be pretty interesting.
God.
I just wish they would. I just wish they would take more advantage of their open world for their main stories. I really think that you can have the exploration be the story. You know, you can have the environment tell the plot for you, as opposed to focusing in on such a very character-specific thing that kind of forces you to play a specific way.
So, speaking as a storyteller, what would you have done differently if you were the one behind this little story in Fallout 4?
Actually, it's a pretty easy answer. I would have nixed the kid. I would have nixed the spouse. I don't even know if I would have had you frozen, honestly, although you still could have done that. I would have had it be that you wake up, Boston is in shambles, but you find people who can help put it back together. And the focus of the game would have been completely on that settlement management system they added to 4.
Right. Maybe the same kind of thing that towards the end of 3. Towards the end of 3, you were aiming to get the water generator online, and that would just vastly improve everybody's situation.
Right, but here it could be used for foul deeds too. Like, you could roleplay it as you're building these settlements to take over, you know, like, I'm gonna be the ruler of Boston at this point, or you build up your settlement and suddenly other settlements. That was a weird glitch, we're not going to talk about that.
Did you just...
Yeah, don't worry about it. You know, maybe you're building up your settlement, all of a sudden you're getting attention from the NCR who wants to assimilate you into their government, and maybe you don't want that, and maybe the society you've helped build up doesn't want that, and like that to me would be so much more interesting because it encourages scavenging, because you got to go and get, you know, supplies so that your society is going to build up and survive, and then you've got to get weapons, and you got to get armor, and you got to get protection, you got to hire mercenaries, or maybe you train your own troops. And
maybe
then
you're a one-man army, and maybe you don't. Everything.
Yeah, maybe you don't want to build the settlement. Maybe you just want to go and invade other settlements so that you can get all the water and food you could ever possibly need. This thing is gross.
Be a raider.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's what I want to see. I want to see what they need to do is build a world and just drop you in it and let you decide what you want to do.
Hulk Hogan.
You know, just build that setting, and then let you make your character and drop them in that environment. Let them decide what they want to make the story themselves. Anyway, that is all I have to talk about on the topic today. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you next time. Spooky.
Spooky.
Spook. Too spooky for me.